So Warren Jeff goes to prison, life sentence, child sexual abuse, one of the most infamous polygamous leaders in American history. Most people figured that was the end of the story. It was not the end of the story. In the same small town, with some of the same families, another guy basically walks in like, "Good news, everybody. I'm the prophet now." He says God told him to take more than 20 wives. At least 10 of them were kids, some as young as 9. And somehow this man, this self-declared prophet, also had 2 Bentleys, a failed coaching business, and a trailer situation so bad that random drivers on the highway started calling the police on him. That last sentence was not a joke. We're gonna get to the trailer. The trailer was real, and it is the reason why these things became public. This is the case behind Netflix Trust Me, the false prophet, and I genuinely don't know how to make this sound more unbelievable than it already is. Tony, are you ready for this one?
Anytime a grown man says God told him he needs more wives, we should be allowed to spray him with a hose.
I would sign that bill immediately. So do me a favor, grab some popcorn, snort some Dr. Pepper, and get ready as we dive into another false prophet guide. Quick setting, because you need exactly one piece of context here, and then I promise we'll move fast. Short Creek, 2 towns sitting on top of each other across a state line. Colorado City, Arizona, Hilldale, Utah. For decades, this was the headquarters for the FLDS, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, run by one guy, Warren Jeffs. In 2011, Jeffs gets convicted of sexually assaulting 2 girls, 12 and 15, and goes to prison for life. Yes! There's only actually one thing that you need from this section. When the one guy controlling everything goes to prison, the structure doesn't always collapse. Sometimes it just creates a job opening. And in a town where people were raised to believe obey the prophet and obey God are the same sentence, that job opening does not stay empty for long. Enter Samuel Bateman. Okay, so here's where it gets genuinely strange. And we're only 2 minutes in. Bateman wasn't just an outsider. He's been FLDS his entire life, and reportedly one of Jeff's actual trusted guys. And then according to reports, Jeff's from prison sends out a written revelation denouncing him. Okay, can we sit in this for a second? The man currently serving a life sentence for child sexual abuse looked at this other guy's behavior and said, "That's too much even for me."
That is genuinely the strangest character reference in human history. Even the convinced child abuser thinks this guy's a problem.
Right? You would think getting publicly disowned by your former leader tanks your credibility. Instead, it apparently freed Bateman up. He stopped trying to be Jeff's guy and just started to be his own prophet, his own revelations, own followers. He didn't need the whole town to buy in. He just needed a small group of people who already believed the prophet's word is law, and then pointed that belief at himself. By the time investigators caught up with him, Bateman had more than 20 spiritual wives. At least 10 of them were minors, some as young as 9. We're not going to get into details on what happened to these girls. They're children, and they deserve to be talked about carefully, not as shock content. What we are going to look at is how this guy kept this thing hidden for years. Because honestly, given how this man chose to live his life, there's a part that just doesn't add up. I have to talk about the Bentleys.
The Bentleys!
You'd think if you're running a secretive, high-control religious group, the move is low profile. Blend in. Bateman did the opposite. He's driving around town in not only 1, but 2 Bentleys. At the same time, he's apparently running multiple failed business ventures, including, and I want to be extremely clear that I am not making this up, something called goal coaching.
Nothing says trust my divine plan for your eternal soul like a guy whose actual business plan was 2 Bentleys and a 5.
A prophet with a luxury car habit and self-help side hustle is not subtle. In that contradiction, direct line to God in one hand, and failing goal coaching business on the other is part of the reason why people eventually started looking twice. So how does someone running this visibly chaotic of an operation stay hidden from the law enforcement for years? That's the control system, and it's worse than the Bentleys. This is the part of the case that's almost more disturbing than the headline numbers of wives, because it's the part that explains how everything just stayed hidden. According to public investigators, Bateman ran his group on public confession. Followers confessed personal failures out loud in front of everyone, and Bateman decided what happened next. Sometimes that meant public humiliation, but prosecutors say in some cases, the punishment for a confessed sin was for a man to hand over his own wife or daughter to Bateman.
That is not faith. That is a group chat from hell.
Think about what that does. If everyone has to confess everything, there's no private thoughts left. Bateman has leverage on every single person all the time. And if confessing a mistake can cost you your own family member, you stop confessing. You stop talking, especially to anyone outside of the group. That's not a locked gate or an armed guard. Say the wrong thing, you lose someone you love. So nobody says anything. And Bateman wasn't just staying in one place. He traveled constantly. Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Nebraska, moving members of his group, including kids, across state lines. Hang on to that phrase. Crossing state lines with children. That's the exact thing that turns a local weirdness into a federal case. Alright, so quick gut check before we keep going, because I want you to actually picture where we are right now. We got a guy who got rejected by one of the most notorious cult leaders in American history for being too much. He's driving 2 Bentleys, failing at goal coaching, and running a confession system that's basically a leverage machine on 20 plus people. And he's moving kids across state lines constantly for years. Nobody outside of this group knows any of this yet. So here's the actual question. How does something this locked down, this controlled, ever get cracked open from the outside? Because the answer is not a raid. It's not an information tip out of nowhere. It's 2 people and a really, really weird traffic stop.
Christine Marie and Tolga Caddis.
2 names, Christine Marie and Tolga Caddis, a researcher and a filmmaker, married to each other, who spent years getting close to Bateman's inner circle. Caddis reportedly filmed hundreds of hours of footage of the group from the inside. Not a sting, not a one-time tip. This was years of access, documented in real time. Eventually, handed over to the federal investigators.
Massive respect to the 2 people who showed up and did this for years before anyone else was paying attention.
That footage gave the FBI something they almost never get walking into a case like this. A paper trail from inside the group before a single arrest. And then the case breaks wide open on a highway.
The trailer stop.
August 28th, 2022. Highway near Flagstaff, Arizona. Drivers start calling the police. Not a crash, not a plate. Drivers are seeing something move inside an enclosed trailer being towed down the road. Specifically, small fingers moving through the gap of the trailer's rear door. Arizona state troopers pull the vehicle over on Interstate 40. Driver, Samuel Bateman. Inside his SUV, 2 women. 2 girls under 15. Inside the trailer, he's towing 3 more girls, ages 11 to 14. No ventilation. Investigators find a couch, camping chair, and a bucket being used as a toilet.
Camping chairs and the bucket is doing so much work in that sentence, and I need everyone to sit for a second.
Bateman gets arrested on the spot. Initial state child abuse charges. He posts bond, but that traffic stop sets off a chain reaction. The FBI serves a search warrant on his home in Colorado City. Arizona's Department of Child Safety pulls 9 girls out of that home into care. And then, from jail, Bateman calls his supporters back home and tells them to start deleting messages off an encrypted app and to get passports ready for the women and girls in that group.
Step 1 of fixing this. Delete the evidence and get the passports out. Sir, that is not damage control. That is a confession with extra steps.
Prosecutors apparently agreed, because a couple weeks later, federal authorities arrest Bateman again, destroying records, tampering with a federal investigation based on those exact jailhouse calls. So by mid-September 2022, Bateman's in federal custody. 9 girls are in state care, and a roadside trailer stop is now a federal case. You'd think that's the end. Guy's in jail. Yes! Kids are safe. Thank God. Case moves to court. It is not the end.
Followers and the conspiracy.
November 2022, Bateman is still in federal custody, and he reportedly gives instructions from jail to 3 of his wives, Naomi Biston, Donna Burlow, and Moretta Rose Johnson. The instructions: reconnect with the girls who'd been placed in group homes and get them out. And they did it. 8 girls were taken from the group home. Johnson reportedly drove the getaway vehicle. They made it out of Arizona, through California, and into Washington State before the law enforcement finally caught them.
If your prophet needs a legal team, a getaway plan, and a coordinated multi-state kidnapping run by his own wives from a jail cell, maybe unfollow them.
All 3 of the women were charged in December of 2022. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, conspiracy to tamper with the federal investigation, and all 3 pleaded guilty to reduced charges. And this is the moment where this case stops being just one guy. Once investigators can show his followers will run an interstate kidnapping on his word from inside a jail cell, that's not a lone offender, that's a network. By the time it was all charged, Bateman was indicted alongside 11 adult followers. Every single one of them were eventually convicted. So, 2 Bentleys, a confession machine, a trailer full of kids, and now an entire network willing to commit federal crimes on his behalf from a jail cell. How does this actually end? 2 of those 11 followers, brothers Liddell J. Bisline Jr. and Torrance Bisline, actually took it to a trial. A federal jury convicted them both on charges connected to child sexual abuse conspiracy that prosecutors said spanned several states and involved at least 10 children. Liddell Bisline Jr. got a life sentence. Part of why his case was so severe, prosecutors said he provided his own daughters as victims.
At some point, this stops being a belief system and starts looking like a criminal organization with worse branding.
The rest of the co-defendants, including the 3 wives from the kidnapping, took plea deals over the following months. And Bateman himself, April 2024, he pleaded guilty to federal charges: conspiracy to commit transportation of a minor for criminal sexual activity, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. December 9th, 2024, Bateman stands in front of U.S. District Judge Susan Bernovich in Phoenix to be sentenced. Prosecutors put up photos. 10 girls. The ones Bateman had taken as wives. The youngest was 9. They read each name out loud, one by one. One of his victims spoke to him directly in court. She told him that she hoped he got everything he deserved, which she said was nothing. Bateman, 50 years in federal prison, lifetime supervised release. He's 48. Do the math on that. It's functionally the rest of his life. And Christine Marie and Tolga Kaddis, the 2 people who for years was silently documenting this, was in the courtroom as well. Alright, so here's where my brain goes after all of this. It is so tempting to file this whole story under, well, that was a Short Creek thing. Remote town, specific religious history, 20 wives, a guy who got disowned by another cult leader for being too extreme. Like, it's a closed system. Weird stuff happens here. That doesn't apply to the rest of us. But let's just take the religious words out of this for a second. Who actually left? One guy decides he's the only source of actual truth. He builds a small group around obedience. And he uses confession, or guilt, or debt, or loyalty, doesn't matter which, to make leaving impossible. The isolation doesn't need a compound in the desert. It just needs everybody to be in the group, and the group convincing you that everybody on the outside cannot be trusted. That shape shows up in places that have nothing to do with profits or polygamy. Bateman just built his version of it in a town that was already primed for it by the guy who came before him.
Humanity really is a group project, and the syllabus just keeps getting worse.
So in closing,
Let's close this thing.
so here's what sticks with me. These groups don't always work because the bleeder is smart. They work because the system is. Confessions create leverage. Leverage creates silence. Silence protects the person on top. And once the system is running, it doesn't matter how obvious the red flags look from the outside. Bateman was driving around in 2 Bentleys, running a failed goal coaching business, and somehow still had people treating him like a prophet. That's the part that makes this thing so disturbing. It wasn't hidden because nobody could see him. It was hidden because the people closest to him were trapped inside of a system that made talking feel impossible. The only reason we know as much as we do is because 2 people kept showing up, kept documenting, and eventually handed evidence to investigators. And because one random driver on the highway near Flagstaff saw something moving in a trailer and decided, nope, that's not right. That one call helped crack open something that had been hidden for years. So if you ever find yourself in a group where confession can cost your relationships, your family, your safety, or your ability to leave, that's not a community. That's the mechanism. Get out and go tell someone.
And if your profit has 2 Bentleys and a goal coaching LLC, that's not a calling. That's a red flag wearing a cardigan.
Good place to leave it, Tony. If you want to go deeper, trust me, The False Prophet on Netflix has direct interviews with people who lived through this. And if you want more of these cults, cases, and stories that sound way too unbelievable, but somehow are, subscribe and I'll see you next time. Subscribe, please do it. It helps so much. Please do it. Bye.